Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left. What's up, Big Neil?
Lance, this time of the year, it's amazing how important whatever shred of news we get is. And that's what's
Yes.
fun about this because we won't discuss the schedule come October outside of who's next, what string of games you have coming up. But speaking of the schedule in totality, like we're going to do today, and like is kind of the talk around the NFL right now, brings with it a certain sense of enjoyment, the anticipation. That's the part of this game I always enjoy is what's coming next. I like this time of the year just because of that more than anything. It's a fresh look, um, even to the point where I haven't memorized the schedule yet. That'll come in the coming weeks, but there's plenty to discuss with it, some variation, some interesting things, and we're going to dive into it. So I'm excited.
Yes, you are an absolute degenerate, Neil.
I
I
am.
n- I
This is true.
never memorized the schedule. I have limited brain cells left at my age as I'm getting older, and the schedule. I'm probably like a player in that regard. I just know the next game.
You're paid to know important things, though. I'm kind of
Yes,
not.
I mean, so, and then I have a hard time remembering those. But listeners, thank you everybody who's hopped on the program. If you want to join the experience, go to YouTube, do a search for the New Standard. Also, when you search for your podcast, do a search for the New Standard and Neil Coulon and or Lance Williams. So, Neil, let's hop right into it. And thank you everybody. Please like and subscribe. Um, Arthur Millette, surprised about that?
I am. Um, Not in the sense that it's a big deal. It's surprising. Not something I think we would have anticipated going into the going into the mini camp period, the OTA period of the offseason schedule. The reason I say that is mostly because we spent the entire offseason talking about how bizarre it seemed that the Steelers didn't have any secondary. Certainly for 2024, they have a bunch of guys. Mollett was one of them who had 1 year left on their current contracts. All signs pointed then to a shift in um, schematic emphasis, what they want to do with their secondary. That's probably why they were letting some of these contracts expire to bring in other players that perhaps fit something they want to do a bit better. And considering the draft selections of Porter and Trice, I would imagine what they're looking to do is play a lot more press man coverage. If they feel that Mollett is not fit for that, they're letting him go early. In hopes that he has an opportunity to grasp on with another team. It might have been more, I don't play that way, just cut me, and they oblige. I don't know. We really don't have any details. They haven't been available to speak on team matters for a little while. But overall, Mollett, I know how much grief he gets from people. It's hard playing defensive back in the NFL. They get beat. It's not always one guy's fault. There are a lot of other responsibilities that come in. It's not people evaluate coverage always as if it's a man setup. If Mollett is supposed to be where he is, that player could be open because somebody that isn't where they're supposed to be isn't there, and that makes the player open. That's not Mollett's fault, but that's the guy you're going to blame for it. Not to suggest that Arthur Mollett is the greatest slot cornerback who's ever played the game, because he's not. But I think he was a reasonable veteran. I'm curious what they intend to do with the slot position. As if you want to go back and look at it, when Tyler Forness of Vikings Wire was on with me after the Patrick Peterson signing, one thing that he pointed out that I agreed with was Peterson is probably not a real lateral slot corner at this point in his career. He's probably better off on the outside playing more vertically. So I don't know if he is an option at that spot. I could be wrong. That it might be what they want to do anyway. I'm not sure. I definitely don't think that Joey Porter is a slot cornerback. And for the little that we know of Corey Trice, a seventh round pick, I don't think they're putting out there on day one. So maybe there's another move coming. I don't know. It's interesting. I would categorize it as a surprise, but it won't be the last type of surprise if they are overhauling what they're looking to do within their secondary.
Yeah, it looks like there is another move that's going to be made. You look at the names here: Mardre Harper, Patrick Peterson, James Pierre, Joey Porter Jr., Chandon Sullivan, Levi Wallace, Chris Wilcox, Akello Witherspoon, Duke Dawson, Norwood, Corey Trice. None of those names necessarily hop out to you as slot corner guy, other than possibly Trey Norwood. So it feels like there is another move that's going to be made. Now, when you were talking about this, you briefly talked about OTAs, and that's one thing before we jump into the main topic of the show, and that's Mason Rudolph. Um, what's going on right now for the rookies in the draft picks? You're talking about OTAs real quick, and you said, that's going on, and we had some activities for the rookies. What's going on from a football perspective for the rookies and the draft picks, the undrafted guys and the drafted guys, and what's going on?
Well, we just got through rookie mini camp, and has been described by Mike Tomlin in the past, the activity itself, as more of a physical orientation. They're going to run drills. They're going to see what type of shape guys are in. But the main thing they're doing is coaching them up on the things that they're going to be doing come team mini camp, which is at the end of the month. And that is kind of a precursor into training camp. As Mike Tomlin has famously called it many times in the past, it's football in shorts. They're not doing, says Tomlin, they're not doing an extensive amount of evaluation of the players until they get pads on. They're hitting and they're playing the game for real. There's something to be said for that. I know this from experience. A couple different. I'm not going to use the name, but I know a guy from growing up who got an opportunity with one of the NFL teams. The coach is no longer with that team anymore, but he was a Division III player. He was a really good Division III player, but he said he got this invitation to rookie minicamp to go take a look at things, and the coach ran him. They ran quite a bit, and he was not in shape. He didn't expect to get a camp invite, and it wasn't really anything that he was interested in pursuing. And the coach walked up to him, kind of smiled and said, "Hey, not in the best shape, are you?" And he said, "No, to be honest with you, coach, I'm not." And coach said, "Okay, you're cut." That was it. They're in this game. It's obviously a requirement to be in top physical shape. If you're not, you're useless on an NFL field. There's a lot of things that you have to do, and you have to be able to do it full steam in segmented reps. That's something you have to train yourself to do. You have to be in condition for. You can't just play yourself into shape in the NFL. It's not the 70s anymore. They don't do that. So one part of it is taking a look at the rookies, especially the undrafted rookies, to see what type of shape they're in. It's an easy weed out process. Some of them were signed for contract. This is where it gets kind of confusing. Draft picks may or may not have signed contracts yet. That's not holdout situation, but they might not have a contract. There are guys who sign to participate in minicamp. And with that, it's kind of a tryout. They're not on their active roster. They're players that they're looking at. Tanner Morgan right now is probably the most prominent one that has been discussed. He is not on the roster. He was signed as an undrafted free agent. They usually make decisions on players like that, letting them go or not bringing them back or whatever, based on how they perform at the rookie camp. So we'll probably hear who is going to be on the mini camp roster within the coming days, I would imagine. As of now, it doesn't sound like Tanner Morgan would be somebody that they would have, but at the same time, maybe they want 4 quarterbacks. That brings us to our old buddy, Mason Rudolph. Now, I personally thought we were done with the Mason Rudolph stands.
Let's pause that. Let's pause it. I know you have a lot.
Well, you brought it up. That's why I was
No. But I want to lead into it in a particular way, and just clarify this real quick. There's no installation of any sort right now at this point. That's more training camp, and I'm glad that you mentioned the bit about shape, because for like just me and you and people listening to this show, coming in shape at this point in time is akin to showing up to work 5 minutes early. When you just start a new job and you're being evaluated and you have that 90-day period where they could just let you go at any time and they're kind of just trying to see what type of employee you are. You come early, 8 o'clock, you get there at 7:50. You're at your desk, you're doing your thing, you're doing your stuff. And that's kind of what this is right now. They want to evaluate the level of professionalism, because shape is a measure of professionalism. If you come in out of shape, it kind of says something. What it says, I don't know, but it says there's two different things being stated. If Neil comes in tip-top shape and I come in with a donut, so that's what it is right now. And hopefully, those guys will be in shape. You get no injuries, and guys are ready for camp and ready to go. But let's talk about this real quick before we jump into the Mason Rudolph. Let me ask you this, and I want you to clarify for the listeners, and big up to everybody out there. Please like and subscribe to the program. What is the role largely for the third quarterback on a roster? And is it pretty much the same across the NFL, or is there some specificity across the teams?
Of course, there's going to be different things for different teams. It largely depends on what their quarterback situation is. Okay, to address this at the beginning, I think the quote unquote room is the most overused and uselessly used term in all of fan chatter. Okay, the room of players who are in there, it doesn't work the way people want to think that it works. All right, having a third quarterback in the room, it makes the room better. It's arbitrary. It depends on what a team wants to do, because what we overlook all the time is the fact that there is an offensive coordinator, there is a quarterback's coach, and most teams have some type of offensive assistant that works with quarterbacks. You don't sign a third quarterback and pay him $1 million a year to be a coach. You could sign a coach that has a lot more ability to focus on what's going on from a coaching perspective instead of their own. If you were to hire one at a third of the price, probably less. Mason Rudolph and the team's third quarterback last season provides something of a benefit as far as observing what's going on, taking notes, understanding what a team is doing, but they're not scouting ahead. They're not looking at coverages of future opponents and helping compile the game plan. They're charting plays. I mean, it's not nearly as big a deal as people make it out to be. There is a lot of value, though, having a veteran in a role like that when you have a younger quarterback. In the Steelers situation, obviously that's the case. I would argue, though, that the Steelers have that in a backup quarterback already who's set to make $8 million this season. Do they need another one? How many coaches does Kenny Pickett need? How many chefs does it take to spoil the soup? That's really kind of what this comes down to. And it's specific to the team. I don't know how, say, the Dallas Cowboys want to run their quarterback depth chart any more than I really know the Steelers. I just know, generally speaking, around the league, with a young starter, you like to have a veteran backup. And in fact, in most cases, you'd like to have a veteran backup. But when you get a high level veteran, somebody like, say, this is just the first one that came off the top of my head, Matthew Stafford. The Rams drafted Stetson Bennett to probably be a backup and develop and kind of figure everything out. Stafford knows the game backwards and forwards. He's been around forever. The guy has played, feels like, since I was in high school. He doesn't, everybody needs coaching, but it's not like he needs to be told what to do. It's just good to have somebody that's knowledgeable, that has a good sense of the game, compiling information for them to break down and figure out what they want to do as a team strategically. It's not the backup's job to input opinions on what to do. It's gathering the information and knowing what to look for. If they put you and me on the sideline, Lance, and told us to chart plays, we probably could, but we're not going to understand really what we're doing. There's sense in having somebody that understands the game and the context and what a team is doing offensively to understand how to communicate that information. But it's not like a real coaching position. So your third quarterback is there to be another set of eyes and ears to help give input. The other part to this, and I think this is where Steelers fans tend to get kind of muddled in all of this. Ben Roethlisberger really liked Josh Dobbs. I can't explain why. I'm sure he's a hell of a guy. I have nothing to do with that. I don't care if he's a rocket surgeon or not. Doesn't make any difference to me. He understands the game well enough, and he could work well enough with Ben that the team wanted to bring Dobbs back because probably Ben asked them to do that. Whether there was real friction between Ben and Rudolph, I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. There's a lot that's made out of that stuff without any specific evidence. It seems like there definitely could be. I'm not saying Ben liked or did not like Rudolph. What I know is this. The team kept Rudolph on the roster last year, which was not something I expected to happen. I thought they would have released him because of his salary. They brought him back to be the third string quarterback, and he dressed for what, like 2 games last season?
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Yeah, I was thinking like he didn't. I couldn't recall that he dressed ever. I was just going to throw it out there.
Pickett missed a couple games, but Pickett was the backup quarterback. He won that job in training camp. Rudolph didn't dress until there were injuries to Pickett and Trubisky. He didn't play at all, obviously, but so he's being paid to help fill in certain duties. We're not going to find out specifically what those are. But
is there a competition for the backup spot? I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't think so either. But find me a way the move makes sense otherwise for either the team or Rudolph. Keep that in mind. Rudolph is not. We can't speak to what his options are. We can say this though: there are a lot of really bad backup quarterbacks in the NFL who are signed. Okay. Nate Peterman has not had any trouble getting work in the NFL. Why is that? Because there aren't very many of them. And there are even fewer of that group that has starting experience. Rudolph has a lot of starting experience. He has value. Now, granted, you can make the argument pretty easily that Rudolph is most valuable to the team that he's been playing with the offense that he's been around. But the offense did not work this past year the way it did with Roethlisberger. That's the offense that Rudolph played in. Rudolph hasn't played in this offense. Trubisky has. So, again, we're talking about a third quarterback. Let's not dismiss the fact that their backup right now is Mitch Trubisky. And I think that's a reasonable backup. Now, they're paying Trubisky $8 million. That's a lot. I can see why the Steelers might want to ensure they get the best backup for what they want to do and bring in some competition for Trubisky, because Trubisky, too, is a free agent after this season. So I don't think the move is as indicative of a game day decision the way people are making it out to be. And perhaps it's more of a training camp thing. Let's add this wrinkle into it as well. Going back to conditioning, outside of that, physically speaking, can't make the club if you're in the tub, right?
I love that quote.
With training camp in particular, they want to have the full allotment of players that they are able to have in order to conduct drills, do the things that they need to do. In many cases, you need all of that. In many cases, you need a third and a fourth quarterback to throw balls at the undrafted free agents who aren't going to make the team either, to fill out everything that you're trying to do. You want to give as much exposure to everybody as you can. And granted, it's not very much, but you can't throw 600 passes a day. They don't want Pickett working that much during training camp. They don't want Trubisky working that much during training camp. You bring in another arm to throw the, for lack of a better word, the useless reps. We thought, and fairly so, Tanner Morgan could fit that bill. Now, I'll say this, not patting myself on the back, but living in Minnesota, watching the Minnesota Golden Gophers football team for the last 12 years when Morgan has been the starter, and I'm exaggerating, but not much. The guy's been there forever. I've seen Tanner Morgan play a lot more than anybody else in Pittsburgh has. I promise you. The guy is not an NFL player, not even close. He is a camp arm. So bringing him in, it means he's somebody they're looking to get reps from. They sign guys like this all the time. Ironically, this is what Duck Hodges was before he had to start, which is a nightmare scenario, which doesn't happen very often across the entire NFL. So Morgan is there strategically to run drills during camp and see if they have anything with him. They probably don't. They drafted Chris Oladokun last year to do that, and they got exactly that out of him. That's all he was, and they cut him. Morgan is probably no different than that. I don't think that Rudolph coming in moves the needle much with that anyway. Is he competition? Do they plan on keeping him? I don't know what his contract details are right now either. I know as a veteran, he would have a smaller cap number than what his salary is if they don't give him a bonus, or they can give him a bonus and discount that from the cap. Either way, it's if the team says we want to spend a little bit more for our third string quarterback, okay, then they do. That's fine. This is not an indication that they need Rudolph in any way. It's just, something might happen. We may as well lock him up now. It's probably that more than anything else. And I see that makes some sense, but let's keep in mind, overall, Rudolph's value to this team is minimal until at least one thing happens. Okay. If Pickett gets hurt, Trubisky is starting. Logically, Rudolph then is going to be the backup. If that's valuable to you, okay, but Trubisky's the backup now. It's not as if Rudolph tops him in some way because he might get hurt. Okay. The idea here is having two quarterbacks who can play. That's really what you want. Pickett has concussions, but you know what? Every player is one thing away from a concussion every single game. It happens all the time.
But Neil,
you cannot plan on injuries.
But Neil, they have the new helmet.
Yeah, that's going to stop everything.
The new helmet's going to fix everything. And Wes agrees with you. Wes says Rudolph doesn't move the needle for me in either direction. Let me jump into a question that we had. New listener, Charlie Y. What's up, Big Charlie? Charlie asked the question, is the NFL going to change the rule about having an emergency quarterback dressed?
They discussed it, and this is almost entirely in typical NFL fashion, the overreaction to the rare scenario in which that becomes a thing, which is what happened in the playoffs when Brock Purdy got hurt like 7 snaps into the game against Philadelphia. It hurts the product. That's true. For them to dress another quarterback, keep in mind from the owner's perspective, what that means is they have to pay another quarterback.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks aren't cheap. And from there, you're developing a guy that, again, the wheels have fallen off if that guy gets in the game, which is what happened to San Francisco. And that's unfortunate, but they also had 2 quarterbacks get hurt before that. And then the third one went down. That really doesn't happen very often. So to set up a rule that would guarantee that every team has to spend $750,000, which is the minimum, on another player that isn't going to play, it doesn't seem like the smartest course of action, considering how infrequently they ever face this situation. It really just doesn't happen very often. I saw it. It was weird. Josh Johnson has been in the league longer than Tanner Morgan has. Okay. Josh, I was in grade school when Josh Johnson was in college. I swear he's been around forever. He's literally been rostered by like 15 teams in the NFL. No business playing in that game. And he looked like he had no business playing in that game. It sucks. It hurts the product. San Francisco is a much better team than what Philadelphia showed them they were that day. Hopefully they can be at full strength and get a rematch. It didn't happen that way. Is it enough to necessitate an entire rule? I don't think so. The reason I say that is because the NFL wants to provide the fan-friendly reaction to everything that happens and launch a gross overcorrection to everything. Do you remember that year when they wanted to make pass interference reviewable?
Yeah.
That was solely because of what happened in the Saints playoff game. And honestly, I don't remember who that was that they played. Horrible non-call, complete mistake. The officials blew it. To set up something for the entire league based on one significant mistake in a significant moment doesn't solve anything. It creates more problems. Owners are not going to want to do it because they're not going to want to spend more money on another quarterback that statistically they're never going to see on the field. And if they do, you lost already anyway, because it's not going to be a good quarterback. And you're going to have Josh Johnson. Okay. It's the same thing.
And you're making a good point because, at one part of my life, I used to do public policy work. And a lot of times when policy is created, it's in response to a freak incident. And
A
typically,
one-off, a
yeah,
one-time
it's a
thing. That's
one-off.
the
It's
problem.
and when you make policy based on something like that, the policy is typically bad because you're trying to address a freak situation, a one-off, and there's typically no need for the policy because it's a one-off. Good policy typically takes time to create. It takes some data. It has to be something that you kind of think about over the course of time, not knee-jerk response to stuff. But let me ask this as we flip a little bit away from Mason Rudolph and we talk a little bit about Kenny Pickett. In terms of the third quarterback, um, does it help Kenny at all? Is what how, because I think all of this is about the development of Kenny Pickett and his growth and
Mm.
maturation. So how does does him coming back help Kenny in any way develop?
I don't think so. That's my point. It's not. People are making this out to be like it's such an intimate move. It really isn't. They're adding a veteran quarterback that they know, that they have experience with. Very well could have told him after his exit interview or in his exit interview at the end of last season, we'd like to bring you back. We see you as our third stringer next year, but we can give you a chance to compete, see what it's like in camp. No guarantees. And Rudolph said, "Thanks. I'm gonna test the market. I'm gonna see what else I can get. I'd like to have a backup job without, I'd like to come in as a backup somewhere, and I think that opportunity will be out there." Hasn't materialized, but we're in injury season now. You don't know who's going to blow out an Achilles tomorrow, and with that, a job opens up. The fact that he is allegedly going to sign, as of the recording of this show, he has not signed yet, as far as I know, which doesn't necessarily matter. All indications are that they have come together on an agreement. They just haven't signed it yet. He may have said, you know what, I'd rather get into camp. I'd rather, throw the ball around a bit, show that I can still do it and get the work in and tell everybody else I'm not just sitting on the couch. I'm in camp. I'm doing stuff for his impending release. It's possible that that's the case. I would also pose this. Is it possible maybe Tanner Morgan got hurt and they need another arm for minicamp?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
The reason I say that is a couple of years ago when Aaron Rodgers was doing whatever the hell he was doing, as usual, skipping everything in the offseason.
He was in the dark.
And this is pre-darkness, a couple of years ago. One of 17 contract disputes he had. They didn't have a quarterback outside of Jordan Love on their roster. So they signed Blake Bortles. And everybody in Green Bay freaked out thinking that, oh, it's competition. Jordan Love's on his way out. They signed Bortles to throw the ball at the undrafted guys because there isn't anybody, because Rodgers isn't going to be there. Bortles is a savvy veteran. He understands the drills. He knows how to conduct and do the things that he has to do. He's a pro. And with him, it's let your name get out there, show a team, at least the Packers, that you still have some ability. Maybe they can vouch for you when you get released. It's a business decision more than anything. I'm not saying specifically that's what the Steelers are doing with Rudolph. I'm just saying let's not discount the possibility of something like that because it's rational. Instead of putting him on the roster and acting like he's a coach, Mason Rudolph, the quarterback's coach, I don't know what sense that makes to anybody, but instead of that, let's admit that there are other circumstances that could be at work here. And I think that it's reasonable to suggest Rudolph is brought in to get through minicamp because maybe the younger guys are all dog bleep or one of them got hurt and they want a third arm in there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I when he signed and I knew we were going to talk about it, I was just trying to go through my head and think like, okay, it's Mason Rudolph, weed carrier, donut getter, coffee warmer. I like whatever. It just kind of that's the level of the needle that it moved to me. But let's do this. And this is how, because Mark Sloss asked us, and if you want to say, because I know you did a prediction on Twitter, I think you did a record, but we're not going to go through it in detail. But what was the when you went through the schedule, what did you come up with? What was the record?
I think I said 10-7.
Okay. I know I said 11-6, but this is how I want to look at the schedule. Because again, for me, it's all about the development of Kenny Pickett. And I think largely when you go into football games, when you're talking about favorites, money line, all that stuff, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the quarterback position. And, you definitely have an advantage when you go into matchups where you have the better quarterback, just given the importance of the position, the quarterback having the ball in his hands at all times, making decisions. Uh, so let's jump through the schedule, and we're going to go through the schedule. And I want you to tell me, in what games do you think the Steelers have the quarterback edge?
Oh, jeez.
Ah, let's go through it. Let's go through it. Let's go. Or do you want to say something?
Week 1.
Yes.
I don't know who their quarterback is going to be.
It's going to be your guy. It's going to be Lance.
I don't know. That's the funny thing. I was talking to Kyle Madsen, who's the Niners wire editor back at USA Today, a colleague of mine who's intimately familiar with San Francisco. And I asked him tongue in cheek via text the other day, is Trey Lance dead? Why are people talking about Sam Darnold starting there? Sam Darnold in his 11 good NFL throws in 6 seasons. Why is he the presumed starter there? Is Lance still injured? Is he not back yet? I'm not sure, but I will say this: Trey Lance, coming off injury without a ton of experience, but assuming he gets a full off season of work in, not the quarterback you want to see in week 1, because you don't know what that guy is doing. You don't know what they're going to have him do. That's tough. Darnold, you got a pretty good sense of who Sam Darnold is by now. I don't think it's incredibly difficult to prepare for Sam Darnold. I don't care whether his team won games against Pittsburgh or not. He's not a good quarterback, top to bottom. We should know that. We don't know if Trey Lance is or not. We don't know what Trey Lance can do. This isn't a fair example, and it's not current, but you might remember the game Terrell Pryor was starting for the Raiders, and nobody thought anything of Terrell Pryor. He broke off a 90-yard and an 80-yard run, and they won by 2 touchdowns.
I was at that game.
You don't know. God, I hated. I said this on Twitter last week too. I absolutely hated Steelers games in Oakland. They always just sucked. They were terrible games, whether they win or lose, and they lost.
I've been to every single one.
They were just bad.
I've been to every single one since 1995. The funny thing about that is I was trying to get into the Coliseum to get to my seat
when the entrance collapsed. Was that
no the first you? No, I saw Terrell Pryor's number getting further and further away from Troy Polamalu as he was running towards the end zone. That was the first thing I saw.
Wasn't it Ike? I thought Ike was the one in deep pursuit, but Pryor got straight and he hit the Jets and he was just gone. It's like, oh man.
I was like, Troy's lost the step.
That was like the second play from scrimmage, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was like, because I'm walking in, all you hear is Raiders, and you just see Pryor running away. And the first thing I say is, here we go.
Shut them down the entire game except for 3 plays, and they won on that.
Another Steeler loss on the West Coast. So safe to say, you're saying
I would like the stability of Pickett there. I know everyone absolutely loves Brock Purdy and blah blah blah, but bionic elbow Brock Purdy after 10 starts, and I don't think he played nearly as well in his playoff win as people want to make him out to be. Everything in their offense has to be perfect for Purdy to show success, and we saw that on throws in which the receiver was open by 5 yards or more. He was like perfect, good. Throws where he wasn't, he looked like a late 7th round undrafted free agent. I wouldn't honestly. I think with some time and more tape to dissect, a defense is going to really tear him up, and I think Pittsburgh's could do that. I would definitely like Pickett in week 1.
So in week 2 and 3, I'm going to say the Steelers do not have the quarterback advantage going up against Watson and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Do we want to bet on Watson though? That's tough. Physically speaking, it should be early in the season. they have to mechanically change a lot of things that he's doing. So this kind of goes with the point that I was making about Lance. You don't necessarily know which one you're getting when he's out on the field that early in the season. I think there's a lot to be said about Garoppolo playing in a new offense, but you got a good sense of who he is by now. I don't know if you're going to have a great sense on who Watson is after 5 games in Cleveland last season, whatever that was, 5-6 games, I don't even remember. And then with a full off season, he didn't have an off season with him last year. Keep that in mind. He was suspended. So whatever it is he put in minicamp and that obviously didn't hold very well. I'm curious who Watson is going to be. Physically speaking, Deshaun Watson is noticeably more talented than Kenny Pickett is. Cleveland's offense has players on it. There are things that they're able to do if they can put it all together. And as somebody that has sadly vouched for Cleveland to get their shit together for the last couple of years, I really shouldn't give them more rope this season. But it's hard for Watson to be as bad or worse than he was last year. I think can I give a draw? This is nothing. I'm gonna get flamed for this. I know, but I get why everybody hates Deshaun Watson. Take that part of it out. If we're just evaluating, Robert, are you serious with that?
Yeah, I'm just while he posted that. There was a post on the show that
their entire secondary, like now,
Keller Witherspoon got waived. Well, I'll look that up while we continue to go through.
Yeah, do that. Let me bitch about Deshaun Watson some more. Watson didn't play much up until week 12 of last year, week 11, whatever that was. There's bound to be some rust, and it's rust they didn't shake off. A different dynamic, a weird dynamic. He wasn't in the team's. Now I'm going to use the phrase. He wasn't in the room for most of the season. It's hard to make that kind of change on the fly with somebody who's fresh. In a way, obviously you need to start Watson at that point, but I could definitely see if there were people saying, you know what, maybe we should kind of let Brissett handle the next week or two. We're still active for the playoffs. Let Watson get comfortable, and then we'll put him out there. Watson was awful. I mean, he was really bad. That the game he played against Pittsburgh in week 18, that's some of the worst quarterback play I saw last season. He was awful. He is a much better quarterback than what we saw. Physically speaking, he should be a lot better. It's tough for me to just give an advantage to Pickett, who only played half a season, a little over half a season. Played much better football down the stretch. He made a lot of mistakes. We categorized all of that as the season went on. He was a rookie last season. He did some good things. I'm excited about it. We'll see. I think that's a push. That's just me.
So you're giving a push there. So a push is a win in my book. So let's jump to the Houston game.
Can we talk Witherspoon here, though? I think we probably should go over the news.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I don't.
Rappaport tweeted it. According to Ian Rappaport of NFL.com, the Steelers have informed veteran cornerback Ahkello Witherspoon that he'll be released. Source says. Started 7 games over the last 2 seasons. Add in my typical rant about how starting doesn't really matter for a cornerback. He was a 600 plus, 700 plus snap guy, barring injury. He was hurt a little bit of the time. What this move represents, and you take Mollett out, going back to the beginning of this show, and I kind of wish we could start this over now. The Steelers are completely overhauling their secondary, and I'm not entirely sure what their plans are going to be, but they don't have any depth. They're going to have to sign probably 2 other corners, and I'm not sure who that's going to be. My guess is, though, they're going to find the long, lanky Corey Trice, Joey Porter types that can play press. And if that's the case, they are fundamentally changing coverage, that's an astronomical thing. They have not done that recently. Certainly not to press. They haven't played press since Mel Blount. I don't know if that's going to be like a week 1 install type of thing. Like they're going to do it immediately for the season and that they're going all in with it. But Witherspoon, not vouching again, just like Mollett. I'm not saying overall he's the greatest player we've ever seen. I'm not out and out surprised that they would release him. But with Mollett, I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think they told Mollett before rookie minicamp they were cutting him. After rookie minicamp, kind of suggests they saw something that they liked with a rookie and decided Witherspoon wouldn't be an option anymore. But if we're keeping score at home, what we have in terms of cornerbacks is Levi Wallace, Patrick Peterson, Joey Porter, Corey Trice, 7th round pick, by the way, and vet minimum James Pierre. Am I missing one? That's 5.
Yeah, that's about it. There's a bunch of other guys that aren't going to play.
You hit on a point earlier, Lance, and I think this suggests to me the direction that they're going in. Press on the outside, but Trey Norwood is a guy that they've used in the past in that slot role. Now, you might recall a massive mistake on his part early in that Buffalo game that allowed a 85-yard touchdown or whatever that was. Oh, yes. Thank you, Mark. Sullivan. That was the kid, the kid from Minnesota, Channon Sullivan, who I neglected to bring up before. Dumb me. Slot cornerback with experience. I could see him being, a player that they would want. Not that impacts the Witherspoon decision. Witherspoon's an outside corner. Those 6, though, if that's what they're going to go with, that's just it's odd. There's not a whole lot of experience there. Certainly none together. That's a completely overhauled secondary. Every one of those players is basically new because they haven't played together, or in the case of even contributing guy like Norwood, they're going to be doing something that's a little bit different than what they have before. And Wallace hasn't played with the other guys who were there. So Pierre is played on and off. I wouldn't have even necessarily guaranteed he'd make the team. So I don't know. That's an interesting move for the team. I don't have the cap number in front of me. It saves a few bucks. I don't think it's significant. I'd imagine, though, they'll sign another cornerback to bring into camp. Who that will be, I don't know.
According to this story on Florio's site, what's Florio's site
Pro
called?
Football Talk.
Pro Football Talk. And he's reporting, it's saying here that Ian Rappaport of NFL Media reports Steelers will release Ahkello Witherspoon and that the move would save $4 million in cap space. I could look it up, but I don't know. I don't know how significant the cap part of it, the football part,
on the Titanic.
Yeah, the football part of it is very interesting. Does this mean Corey Trice is going to make it?
I'd say it's a real good bet. And to be honest with you, there's a lot. Corey Trice is really interesting, and I don't want to jump in with every other Joe Sweatsock blogger who's making the guy out to be like the next Richard Sherman. He was a 7th round pick for a reason. Okay, let's just keep that in mind. But the thing that he can do, it fits in line with the other moves that the team is making, indicating they are going to play a lot of press coverage this year. He does that well, and he's built to do that. He's like the ideal mold for a press corner physically. I hate to make this example. I want to be very clear on this. I am not at all suggesting he is like this player, but he's built like Richard Sherman. Long arms, taller, and an aggressive press kind of guy, the way that he plays the game. I like this game. I thought after watching him, I thought this guy's going to be on the team. I was just surprised he went when he did. That's some pretty. It's a balls move by the Steelers to wait to the 7th round to get a guy that really seems to fit ideally what they want to do with the cornerback position. I'm not saying that he's going to play a ton right away, but I definitely see why they would have drafted him. There are a lot of teams that play press coverage in the league, though, and none of those teams drafted him. So let's temper our expectations on the kid. Young, he's got a lot of college experience, which usually doesn't bode well for a prospect. If you played that much and didn't get drafted until the 7th round, you wonder how good he is. Not an elite athlete, but he's got an excellent press build as a player. And I think with that, there's some optimism that you can look at. If he's out there on the outside in week 1, something probably happened, and it might not be the best thing in the world. If he's the steal of the draft, then great. We'll talk about this draft with stars in our eyes for the rest of our lives, because he's not even like the top guy that they drafted. So you're very excited of what he might be able to do. I'm just not entirely sure what we're going to get from him in year one.
And over the cap has it listed. And so for a cut pre-June 1st, the dead money is, of course, the proration what's left. It's 1.4, and the cap savings is the base salary, which is 4 million. So it's spot on. It's an easy way to discern it. It's just real quick and dirty. His cap percentage, by the way, was he represented 2.4% of the Steelers' cap.
So
Very interesting.
It's nominal at best. I mean, it's
yeah.
not a huge savings. It's not a big deal. It's that goes into the kitty. That's the money they carry into the season.
That's the first bet in the poker game. That's the ante. It's interesting that we're talking about the Steelers changing their coverage, and we'll get back to the quarterback. Let's do this real quick with the schedule, and then I'll make my point with the corners, and I'm just going to go through it quickly so we can get through it. I think the Steelers have the advantage at the quarterback position in the San Francisco game, Houston game. I'm going to say the Tennessee game, the Rams game, because I have no idea who's going to be the quarterback, the Green Bay game, the Arizona game, the Indy game. So in 7 games.
The Rams game, because we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, although I'm not sure that's entirely true. But and then the Tennessee game, because we know who the quarterback is going to be.
Yeah, we know who the quarterback's going to be. Yeah, the Rams game.
Green Bay as well.
Stafford, I'm assuming Stafford still plays football.
He's fine as far as I know.
Okay. So then it would be the Rams would obviously have the advantage there. It's ironic in this schedule that I thought that stood out to me is I don't think the Steelers play the most daunting quarterbacks.
Not at the end.
Not at the end for sure.
And you got Burrow in there, but you're looking at between Burrow games, you've got Kyler, Mac Jones, and probably the rookie in Indianapolis, Richardson, who's a beast, but probably not going to be a consistent player by that point. Then you've got Burrow again, and then Geno, and then Lamar. That's a winnable slate for a quarterback, and for a quarterback playing on a team that has almost by rite of passage played better over their last 7-8 games in comparison to their first 9 games. It seems like that's prime for them to really make a move. But with Cincinnati wedged in there, that might provide for some drama, I'm sure. But I agree with you. I think the quarterback advantage tilts Pittsburgh's way down the stretch there.
Yeah, I think, and even with Garoppolo, you talked about Watson, his issues. You still could see some pushes. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule. I mean, we know Burrow has the flat out advantage. But there's not many games outside of Lamar, Burrow, and the Rams where I think the quarterback has a flat out advantage over the Steelers, which I think bodes very well for the Steelers in this 2023 campaign. But let's switch reels real quick and let's get back to your thought about playing press man and the Steelers changing their coverage. And I'm going to throw something out and tell me if you agree or not. I think we're going to start seeing more press man in the league. And I think the reason why you have to play more press man these days is you have to disrupt the quick game.
Yep, exactly right.
There's too many easy completions you can get if you're not trying to disrupt routes. I mean, guys can just throw it up and down the field all game. They'll just eat up the game, eat up the time, get completions, move the ball. You'll make a mistake. They'll score a touchdown. You'll just get beat. You got to do something to disrupt the quick game. And it'd be interesting to see how many snaps last year PFF might have it. I'll look it up. Try to look it up there. You know, I want to see. I want to be interested to see the percentage of man that they played. You know, maybe cover zero, cover one.
Steelers played a good amount of man.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of different ways to describe it. There are a lot of things that happen that are beyond the simple definition of man or zone. They're playing both in whatever coverage scheme you're looking at nowadays. It depends on what players do. The reason I highlighted that comment, Lance, is exactly as you said. Teams are going to want to play more press because what a lot of them are doing, and you see this from McVay and Shanahan quite a bit, they're running other guys underneath deeper routes. So if you're playing back a little bit, if you're playing off in zone, you're following the deeper route inside that zone, and they're putting guys underneath it. If you're playing press, logically, the receiver has to fight more and take more time to get to that deep level to pull the defender away from where the ball is going. That extra time allows a guy like TJ Watt to land. Now, when you aren't doing that and you have a Deebo Samuel who can be utilized at any depth anywhere, which is why he's as valuable as he is in San Francisco, or McCaffrey there as well, you're able to disrupt the timing of those kinds of things. And it's important to do that against quick game because, as the name implies, ball's coming out of the quarterback's hand really fast. If you have to do that, your quarterback only drops 3 steps. So 1, 2, 3, boom, get rid of it. If you drop 3, your pass protection has to hold and push back, in fact, an incoming pass rusher. And you aren't very deep. So TJ Watt can get to the quarterback in far less time than he would if he dropped 7. Okay. So in a quick game, quarterback has to get rid of the ball. If they can't, because in press, you stop the guy at the line of scrimmage. The guy that's supposed to be going behind him can't get there because he got disrupted. Your quarterback's a sitting duck. The value of that for a Steelers pass rush that's probably still the league leader in sacks over the last 7 seasons is astronomical. It's just they never had the personnel to do it, because what they would have had to do is what it seems like they're doing. They would have had to overhaul their entire secondary, or I should say the cornerbacks. And we're seeing that literally in real time on the New Standard podcast. Kella Witherspoon is getting cut. Arthur Maulet's gone. Who knows who's left, but they drafted, in my opinion, 2 corners whose highest and best in the NFL is clearly press man. You don't want Joey Porter playing inside. He's not quick enough. I highly doubt that Corey Trice is a slot cornerback either. These are press man outside guys. If that's the philosophy they're going for, and I'm not putting Trice in the starting lineup, I'm just saying this is the model of guy that they want. I also said that they would draft 2 cornerbacks for this very reason. They have to overhaul it. I didn't think they'd do it all in one season, but it really looks like that's what they're doing. And it is, to your point, Lance, in response to quick game passing, which is what most teams do now, including the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to be interesting to see.
Sorry, I want to make another point really quick. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
This helps the inside linebackers as well. Yes, but what I want to draw your attention to is, for example, they met with Quan Alexander, definitely an inside linebacker in the NFL. They signed 2 new inside linebackers who are probably both going to start. You still have Mark Robinson there. But what's interesting to me is when you have Keanu Neal, he's a safety who probably plays in the box in terms of coverage. Quan Alexander can be kind of seen as the same, to be honest with you. If you look at a hybrid position, a safety meets linebacker, Keanu Neal is the safety who can play some elements of linebacker. I'd argue that Quan Alexander is a linebacker who can play some elements of a safety. Either way, they're inside coverage guys. If the Steelers are signing that as opposed to a veteran, traditional inside linebacker, to me, it really suggests they're playing a lot of nickel and dime. And what they're looking to do is get bigger at the line and push these guys off of their routes. Again, the fundamental shift in what they've done in terms of coverage is not at all what they're building their secondary to play this season. And that's going to be a significant story heading into training camp.
Can we say flux? Can we
Yeah.
say that it is absolutely in flux? And for all you RAS guys out there, Corey Trice's RAS was 9.78.
Without looking at it, Lance, give us the breakdown. I'll bet that's because of his size, right?
I think so. I don't have.
He's a big hoss.
Yeah, he's a big guy. RAS kind of ruined their site. The way you search for stuff,
it was never good.
yeah.
I love the money they're bringing in on it because it's a very, very basic website.
Yeah, but it's hard to find guys just roughly. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So, and if you want to get more information on our schedule, we're going to do another schedule prediction, of course, as we get closer to the schedule or as closer to the season. We'll break down the schedule again. But right now, again, I think Neil's on record for 10-7. When I was doing the schedule show, people were hitting me up in the comments. Your partner is very excited about the season. Neil is picking him to have a winning record. I can't believe it.
I've picked him to have considerably worse records than they had the last 2 years too. I did a radio spot with ESPN out in State College. I've been doing that for several years now. Steve Jones is the host of that show, and I even told him on Tuesday, I think this is the first time I've picked the Steelers to have a winning record in the last 3 years. And I've got statistical evidence that'll show you up and down. They overachieved in those 3 years. They really did. They should have been worse than they were. This is the year I think they kind of push everything over the top and get some more consistency early in the season because they have a lot of continuity coming back. That's what they haven't really had. And that was always my concern. How was the line going to gel early? That's why I said each of the last 2 seasons. And it didn't. They had to move mountains at the end of the year to finish with the records that they did. One had a playoff berth attached to it. The other one didn't. But they're in a much better position entering the season this year than they have in a while. And I think that's going to bear fruit. It's the work that they've put in. It's the strategic vision that they've executed. You got to give them credit for that. I'm excited to see what they can do. Now, are they going to score 29 a game? No. But they're not going to score 15 either, which is what we saw last year. And I wasn't surprised by that.
18. Don't take away that 3 points from them. They need that additional 3. And to Corey Trice's RAS, the height was green. The weight and the bench were all green level, 9.95, 9.59, and 8.47. He was yellow in the 40 at 4.47. Where he was red at was the 20-yard split, 10-yard split. He was yellow, 6.26. He was also green.
Pure press guy.
He was also green in the broad jump, the shuttle, and the 3-cone. He was above 9 in all of those.
You guys need to make me stop doing this. But you know how similar that is to Richard Sherman, though? Now Richard Sherman is one of the best players of his entire era. He is a first ballot Hall of Fame guy. That's because he is as pathologically competitive as a human being can be. He's straight nuts. He willed himself to become the player that he was. Physically speaking, though, he was a receiver, and he's a little bit smaller than Trice measured in at the combine. Sherman was a receiver. He switched over to cornerback. He has an excellently unique build for that position, and that's Trice. Trice will bully you inside the area that he can bully you. Can he turn and run with the fastest receiver in the league over 10 yards? No. If he could, he would have been a top 5 pick, considering how big he is. That's not going to be his skill. But if he can bully a guy short, beat him up, not let him off the line, mirror him in short space, that buys Watt, Highsmith, assuming it's this year, edge rush, A-gap blitz, whatever, more time to get to the quarterback. That's why this defense is valuable. And for once, the Steelers are really showing they're not going to be afraid of giving up the big play nearly as much as they have been. Because you know what? They gave up the big play anyway. Okay.
Yes,
they lost 3 games because of their inability to prevent big plays. It's almost like you really can't. unless you hit the quarterback. And they got away with that to some degree. But this is the year you're going to see Minkah Fitzpatrick seem like he has less value than he does, because he's not going to have to make every single play all the time. You're going to see him get after the quarterback. They're going to sack guys. They're going to tip balls in the air. Linebackers are going to have interceptions. Minkah is not going to have to play a pure playmaking center field. He's going to be able to go where he needs to go to prevent passes instead of intercepting them, which is, great. You want either, but as a result, you'd almost rather have passes not thrown to deep receivers and let the game be played underneath.
Yes. I'm going to put the link for the RAS comparison between Trice and Sherman, but overall, Trice's RAS was 9.65 to Sherman's 7.92. They both were green in height. Sherman was also green in vertical leap, had a 38-inch vertical. His broad jump was in the green category. His shuttle was red. His three cone was in the green. But pretty much across the board in height, weight, bench, 40, 20-yard split, 10-yard vertical, broad, shuttle, and three cone, Trice is better than Richard Sherman in almost every category. There's only one category in which Sherman is better. Actually, I'll take that back. There is.
Can't believe we're doing this.
Yeah, this is funny. This is
going to come back. This is going to come back to haunt us. I am not comparing him to Richard Sherman. I'm just saying Sherman's path was similar at this point in his career. He wasn't thought of as much. I mean, he was a 5th round pick for a very specific defense. That's really what's drawing me into it. People weren't playing the kind of defense that the Legion of Boom ended up playing. That's what Carroll and Schneider wanted to build in Seattle, and Sherman was a great fit for that. If you want to go all out on press man, I think Corey Trice is a good draft pick for you. The fact that he fell to the 7th round is interesting to me, to be honest with you. Looking at it, I kind of thought he'd go a little bit higher. I think he might be more of a niche player, but that's the kind of thing you say about a Joey Porter. He doesn't go in the 1st round because he can't do everything. He's got kind of this fastball, and that's about it. Not to say that he can't do anything else, but for a 1st round pick, you want to have some scheme versatility out of a guy. Porter can play press. That's what he's best at. That's what he's built to do. Trice is the same way. So in many ways, it just goes to show, much like what Seattle did, and not a comparison in how it's going to work out. It looks like that's what Pittsburgh is trying to do, to bring in specialized, select players to do one thing particularly well. And for me, absolutely love it. It's about time. In my opinion, the NFL diversity from a schematic perspective is nice. But if you've got one thing that you do really well, you force your opponent to get a lot better at defeating it. And that eats up their time in preparation every week as well. You have to do certain things well. Seattle lived on that edge throughout its dominant years, lived on that edge, and they beat the ever-loving piss out of the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl. And the Broncos were one of the best offensive teams in the history of the game. They really were. They had no chance in that game. Seattle beat them, in my opinion, worse than we've ever seen a team get beat in a Super Bowl. They got absolutely destroyed. Yeah, and it's because they went after them with what they had. Now, at the same time, you've got psychotic level competitors in Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, the Rhinoceros, Michael Bennett. They put together some bad boys on that team. I'm not saying the Steelers are doing that, but schematically, they're looking like this is really live or die. They're going to do this, and I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to seeing this.
So since we're going to get hammered for this anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Corey Trice is the next Richard Sherman. And since we're going to get hammered for it anyway, I'm going to just go ahead and say it.
I hope so. Nobody would be more excited about that than me. You know what? Here, this is what we'll do, just because he's texting me now, Lance. Let's get Doug on next week. I promise you, Doug will talk on this topic. And he and I have. He really likes Trice. He's a big fan of Trice. I'm curious what he'll say in a very light, quasi-physical, quasi-scheme fit comparison to Sherman. And also, he's going to be the foremost expert anywhere in the NFL on talking about the Legion of Boom and how that all came together. I think that'd be a good conversation. Let's try to get that next week.
Yeah, and big up to Doug. I'm trying to remember the name of the show, but if you guys, you could probably just go to a podcast feeder or a podcast feed and do a search for Doug Farrar and Greg Cosell. They got a podcast out here that they started. That's a really good podcast, a really good X's and O's podcast, a really good show. But with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the program. I want to thank everybody for hopping on to the show. Thank you, Robert, for breaking that news on the program. Really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, once again for hopping onto the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.